If you've ever felt manipulated by those closest to you, hit that subscribe button and join our community of truth seekers. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you have confronted them differently? Don't forget to like this video and ring that notification bell for more jaw-dropping stories of betrayal and sweet revenge. I'll never forget that moment, standing there in our bedroom, surrounded by half-packed suitcases, my wedding dress still hanging in the closet like a beautiful ghost of yesterday's perfect ceremony. The Asheville Mountains had provided such a romantic backdrop for our vows. My heart was still floating on cloud nine as I carefully folded my new bikinis and summer dresses for our dream honeymoon in Maui. That's when Nathan dropped it. So casually, as if he were telling me about a change in dinner plans rather than destroying the intimate getaway I'd been fantasizing about for months. Oh, by the way, I invited Mom to join us. She deserves a vacation too. I froze, a sundress dangling from my fingertips. The words hit me like ice water, shocking my system so completely that for several seconds I couldn't breathe. Our honeymoon, the sacred first trip as husband and wife, was no longer ours. I searched his face for any sign that this was some twisted joke, but found only that familiar, slightly defensive expression he always wore when discussing his mother. The honeymoon suite I'd carefully researched and splurged on, the couple's massages I'd booked, the sunset dinner cruise that promised to be so romantic. Janet would be there for all of it now, inserting herself into every memory we were supposed to make together. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to demand to know what kind of man brings his mother on his honeymoon. But instead, I did what I'd been doing since I first noticed Nathan's unhealthy attachment to Janet. I smiled and swallowed my true feelings. "That's a wonderful idea," I heard myself say, the lie burning my throat like acid. Nathan's relieved smile felt like a knife twisting in my chest. He hadn't expected resistance, but he was prepared for it. I could tell by the way his shoulders relaxed when I didn't fight back. And in that moment, watching him text his mother that the plan was set, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. This wasn't just another boundary crossed. This wasn't just another occasion where Janet's needs trumped mine. This was our honeymoon, the symbolic beginning of our life together, now corrupted before it even began. Behind my plastic smile, my mind was already racing. I hadn't spent a year planning a perfect wedding, only to have my marriage hijacked before it truly started. As I folded another swimsuit and placed it neatly in my suitcase, I was already plotting. This was supposed to be the beginning of our story as husband and wife, not another chapter in the suffocating saga of Nathan and his mother. I needed to act quickly and decisively. Our plane would leave in less than 48 hours, and Janet was probably already packing her bags, gleefully anticipating 2 weeks of inserting herself between me and my new husband. As I zipped up my suitcase, I caught my reflection in the mirror, still wearing the delicate necklace Nathan had given me the morning of our wedding. "To new beginnings," he'd said. Little did I know those beginnings would include his mother as an unwelcome third wheel on our honeymoon. My wedding ring caught the light as I reached for my phone. It was beautiful, perfect, just like our wedding had been, just like our honeymoon was supposed to be. I refused to let Janet steal this from me without a fight. I may have said, "I do," just yesterday, but I never agreed to marry his mother too. As I closed the bedroom door behind me, I made a silent vow to myself. This honeymoon might be starting with a betrayal, but I wouldn't let that define our entire marriage. One way or another, I was going to save what remained of our special time, with or without Nathan's cooperation. I sat on the edge of our bed that night, my wedding ring catching the moonlight as I turned it over and over on my finger. A part of me wanted to confront Nathan directly, to scream and demand respect, but I knew better. When it came to Janet, my husband had a blindness that no amount of reasoning could penetrate. Instead, I made a decision right there. If they wanted a honeymoon together so badly, they could have it. With trembling fingers, I called the resort in Maui, preparing to cancel our reservation. But halfway through my explanation, my voice cracked. The sympathetic reservation manager paused, then asked gently, "Would you like to hear some alternatives, Mrs. Reynolds?" That's when the idea bloomed, perfect in its poetic justice. "Actually," I said, feeling a strange calm wash over me, "I have something else in mind." Over the next hour, I outlined my plan. The resort staff was surprisingly eager to help. Apparently, I wasn't the first wife to deal with an intrusive mother-in-law. We arranged every detail with meticulous care. The next morning, I told Nathan I'd received an emergency call from my sister and would need to join them in Maui a few days late. The relief that flashed across his face, so brief he thought I hadn't noticed, cemented my resolve. "You and your mom go ahead," I said, kissing his cheek. "I'll catch up." But instead of preparing to join them, I booked myself a peaceful cabin in the Smoky Mountains, a solitary retreat where I could think clearly about what my marriage had become. As Nathan and Janet boarded their flight to paradise, I drove in the opposite direction, toward my own version of freedom. From my rustic sanctuary, I tracked their arrival in Maui through Nathan's enthusiastic texts. "Mom loves the resort," he wrote. "The room is perfect for 3 people." I smiled at my phone and replied only, "I'm so glad you're both enjoying yourselves." On their 3rd evening, when I was supposedly still dealing with my sister's crisis, my carefully orchestrated plan unfolded. The resort staff invited them to a complimentary surprise. A romantic dinner for 2 on the beach, complete with candles nestled in the sand, tropical flowers adorning every surface, and a violinist playing softly in the background. I'd paid extra for photographs, wanting to preserve the moment forever. When they arrived at the secluded beach alcove, a beaming staff member greeted them with champagne and heartfelt congratulations on their honeymoon. "We've arranged something special for the newlyweds," he announced, loudly enough for nearby couples to hear. "May you have a lifetime of happiness together." The photos captured everything perfectly. Nathan's face draining of color, Janet's mouth frozen in a horrified "oh," the awkward glances from other resort guests who suddenly realized what they were witnessing. Neither of them noticed the discreet server capturing video of their reactions, not until the waiter presented them with a special dessert platter with "Happy Honeymoon" written in chocolate sauce. That's when my pre-recorded message played on the small tablet they brought with the dessert. I'd kept it simple. "Hope you're enjoying your honeymoon. I thought you two deserved some alone time." Nathan called me 17 times that night. I let each one go to voicemail as I sat on the porch of my mountain cabin, watching fireflies dance against the darkness, feeling truly at peace for the first time since our wedding day. Sometimes revenge isn't about hurting someone. It's about holding up a mirror and forcing them to see the truth they've been avoiding. As I sipped my wine under the stars, I wondered if Nathan was finally seeing what everyone else had always known, that his relationship with his mother was destroying any chance we had at a real marriage. I didn't know yet if our relationship could be saved, but I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I'd never again silence my own needs to accommodate their twisted bond. My dignity was non-negotiable, and I'd just served notice in the most unforgettable way possible. I waited 7 days before driving back home, mentally rehearsing what I'd say when I finally faced Nathan. My cabin retreat had given me clarity I desperately needed, but nothing could have prepared me for what awaited me. Nathan was standing in our kitchen, his face darkened with fury the moment I walked through the door. No hello. No questions about my sister. Just raw, misdirected anger. "How could you do that to me?" he shouted, his voice bouncing off the walls of our home, the home we'd chosen together, before Janet had inserted herself into every corner of our lives. I set my bags down carefully, feeling an eerie calm settle over me. "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, maintaining eye contact. "You invited your mother on our honeymoon without even discussing it with me." His anger deflated slightly, replaced by the familiar dance of excuses I'd grown accustomed to. When the shouting subsided and tears had been shed, mostly mine, we reached what I thought was a breakthrough. Nathan apologized, holding my hands in his, swearing he understood how wrong he'd been. We agreed to couples therapy, and for the first time in months, I felt hopeful. I wanted to believe him so badly. I wanted to believe that the man I'd fallen in love with was still in there somewhere, waiting to break free from his mother's suffocating grip. So I tried to push away the nagging doubt, the voice whispering that this cycle would never end. For 3 weeks, I threw myself into rebuilding our marriage. I researched therapists, scheduled appointments, bought books on healthy boundaries. I was fighting for us while Nathan nodded along, making all the right noises without any real commitment. Then my phone buzzed with a message that shattered whatever fragile hope I'd been nurturing. It was from Riley, Nathan's cousin, the only one in his family who'd ever shown me genuine warmth. My heart stuttered as I read her words. "Hey, do you know Nate and his mom told people you skipped the honeymoon because you couldn't handle being a wife?" I read it 3 times, each time feeling the knife twist deeper. My fingers trembled as I called her. "What exactly are they saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Riley sighed heavily. "They're telling everyone you had some kind of meltdown after the wedding. That you abandoned Nate because you were overwhelmed by marriage, and Janet saved the honeymoon by going with him instead." I sank onto the couch, the room spinning around me. While I'd been scheduling therapy appointments, they'd been constructing an elaborate lie, casting me as unstable, unfit, unable to handle the basic responsibilities of marriage. "There's more," Riley continued reluctantly. "Janet hosted a family dinner last week. She spent the whole night playing the supportive mother-in-law, telling everyone how worried she is about you and how she's, quote, trying to guide Nate through this difficult time." My stomach churned with nausea. This wasn't just betrayal, it was character assassination. They were systematically destroying my reputation, ensuring that if our marriage failed, everyone would blame me. The perfect victim narrative, crafted by the perfect manipulator. I thought of all the sideways glances I'd received at the grocery store that week, the sudden silence when I walked into the local coffee shop. Our small community had already absorbed their poison. "I thought you should know," Riley said softly. "This isn't right." After we hung up, I sat motionless, staring at the wedding photo on our mantel. The smiling woman in white seemed like a stranger now, naive, trusting, blind to what was coming. I traced the outline of my face in the glass, wondering at what point I'd lost myself so completely in this relationship. Nathan wouldn't be home for hours. I had time to decide how to confront this newest betrayal, but the weight of it crushed against my chest, making it hard to breathe. This wasn't just about a ruined honeymoon anymore. This was about my identity, my sanity, my place in this community. They hadn't just stolen our honeymoon. They were trying to steal my truth, replacing it with their twisted version of reality. And the worst part? People were believing them. I curled into myself on the couch, allowing myself one moment of complete devastation before I would need to stand up and fight back. Because this time, I knew there would be no tearful apologies that could erase what they'd done. This betrayal went beyond repair. This betrayal had teeth. I confronted Nathan the moment he walked through the door that night, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. He looked surprised, not guilty, just surprised, as if he couldn't possibly imagine why I would be upset. "So," I said, my voice steadier than I expected, "want to explain why you and your mother are telling everyone I had a mental breakdown?" His face shifted through emotions like clouds passing over the sun. Confusion, recognition, then calculation. I could almost see him assembling his defense in real time. "It's not like that," he stammered, dropping his keys on the counter. "Mom was just trying to explain your absence without making things awkward." "By making me sound unstable?" The words tasted bitter on my tongue. "By telling people I abandoned you because I couldn't handle being a wife?" Nathan's shoulders slumped slightly. "You're overreacting. We had to tell them something and—" "Stop." I held up my hand. "I don't want to hear any more lies." I'd spent the afternoon moving through grief, shock, and finally, a cold, clarifying anger. In that moment, watching him scramble for excuses, something inside me hardened like amber, preserving this feeling, this certainty, that I would never again allow myself to be painted as the villain in my own story. "Riley told me everything," I continued, watching his face strain of color. "The family dinner, your mother's performance as the concerned mother-in-law, all of it." "She shouldn't have gotten involved," he muttered, suddenly finding great interest in the floor tiles. That's when I did something I'd never done before. Without warning, I created a group chat with his entire family, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone who'd been fed their carefully crafted lies. With trembling fingers, I typed a simple message. "Since there seems to be some confusion about our honeymoon, I wanted to share the truth." Then I attached my flight change confirmation showing I'd been booked on the original trip, and a screenshot Riley had sent me of the beach dinner reservation Nathan had made for himself and Janet. Nathan lunged for my phone, but it was too late. The messages delivered with a series of soft pings that seemed to echo through our kitchen. "What have you done?" he whispered, horror washing over his features. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Janet's name flashed across the screen. I answered on speaker, my eyes never leaving Nathan's. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice vibrating with rage. "How dare you embarrass us like this?" "You mean the way you embarrassed me by inviting yourself on my honeymoon without my knowledge?" I responded, surprising myself with my calmness. "Or the way you embarrassed me by telling everyone I'm mentally unstable?" "You have no idea what family loyalty means," she spat. "Nathan has always put family first." "And I should have been his family," I interrupted. "Me, his wife. But I never stood a chance against you, did I?" She launched into a tirade about respect and family obligations, while Nathan stood frozen, watching this confrontation unfold like a spectator rather than a participant. It struck me then how small he seemed, this man I had promised my life to, shrinking before my eyes under the weight of his mother's expectations. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke with a clarity that surprised even me. "Janet, you are not in this marriage. And if you don't stay out of it, there won't be a marriage left. That's not a threat. It's reality." I ended the call and handed Nathan his phone. "Your move," I said quietly. The days that followed were filled with a silence so thick it felt like another presence in our home. Nathan retreated into himself, but I noticed he was texting constantly, always angling his phone away when I entered the room. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. Resentment? Regret? Perhaps a bit of both. Friends from his family started reaching out to me with messages of support. Riley visited, bringing coffee and solidarity. "They've been controlling the narrative for so long," she told me, squeezing my hand. "It's about time someone showed them what the truth looks like." At night, lying beside Nathan's rigid back, I'd stare at the ceiling and wonder how we'd gotten here, how love had twisted into something so unrecognizable. I'd trace the journey backward, the wedding, the engagement, the courtship. Had I missed the warning signs, or had I simply chosen not to see them? Had I believed that love alone could overcome the invisible ties binding him to his mother? I didn't know if our marriage could survive this earthquake. What I did know was that I would never again make myself small to accommodate their lies. The truth had cost me dearly, but the price of silence would have been my entire self. And as I drifted into uneasy sleep beside the stranger who was my husband, I realized that exposing their deception had revealed something else entirely. A strength within me I never knew I possessed. The distance between Nathan and me grew with each passing day. The confrontation had changed something fundamental in our relationship. There was a fracture now, a hairline crack running through the foundation of our marriage that I wasn't sure could ever be repaired. One night, while Nathan showered, I found myself staring at his phone on the nightstand. The soft ping of an incoming message drew my eye. I'd never been the type to snoop, had always believed that trust was sacred. But something inside me, that quiet voice of self-preservation, whispered that I needed to know. With trembling fingers, I picked up his phone. To my surprise, it unlocked immediately. He'd removed the passcode. Or perhaps he'd never expected me to look. What I found shattered what was left of my heart. A private chat with Janet. Hundreds of messages. My eyes caught on one from earlier that day. "Don't let her twist this. You are the victim here. Gaslight her just enough to confuse her." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. My husband, the man I'd vowed to spend my life with, was actively plotting against me. With his mother's guidance, they were strategizing how to manipulate me, make me doubt my own reality. The shower water stopped running. I quickly replaced the phone and slipped back to my side of the bed, my mind racing with the horrible truth. This wasn't just a mother who couldn't let go. This was psychological warfare. From that moment on, I became someone I never thought I'd be, a detective in my own marriage. I began recording everything, phone calls, conversations, even our therapy sessions, which Nathan had reluctantly agreed to attend. During our third session, the therapist asked Nathan how he felt about boundaries with his mother. "I don't see why I have to choose sides," he said, leaning forward. "She's my mother, and she's always had my best interests at heart. It seems unfair to paint her as some kind of villain when she's just trying to protect our family legacy." I froze. Family legacy. Those exact words. That exact phrasing had been in Janet's text to him just 2 days earlier. The therapist's gaze sharpened. "You're not getting coached through this, are you?" Nathan's face went pale, his eyes widening like a cornered animal. He stammered something about needing water and left the room. The therapist turned to me with gentle eyes. "You know this isn't normal, right?" I nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I'm starting to see that." While Nathan was at work the next day, I did something I'd never done before. I searched his home office. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found a small lockbox. The key was hidden in an old cigar case that had belonged to his father. My hands shook as I turned it in the lock. Inside was a leather-bound notebook, labeled Operation Reset, in Nathan's neat handwriting. Page after page detailed their plan: how to isolate me from friends and family, how to make me doubt my perceptions, how to document my instability for an eventual divorce filing that would leave me with nothing. There were notes from calls with Janet, strategy sessions on how to respond if I discovered certain things. They had contingency plans for every scenario, except, apparently, for me finding this notebook. I sat on the floor of his office, clutching this evidence of betrayal, and felt something inside me shift. The pain was still there. God. The pain was overwhelming. But beneath it was something else now. Resolve. Clarity. A white-hot anger that burned away the fog of confusion they'd worked so hard to create. I photographed every page of that notebook. I backed up every recording. I created digital copies of every manipulative text and email, storing them in places Nathan would never find. That night, as we sat across from each other at dinner, the silence between us thick with unspoken truths, I studied the face of the man I'd married. I searched for glimpses of the person I'd fallen in love with, but all I could see now was Janet's puppet, the architect of my planned destruction. "Pass the salt?" he asked, his voice casual, as if he hadn't spent months plotting to break me. I passed it wordlessly, our fingers brushing in the exchange. He had no idea that I knew. No clue that while he and Janet had been writing their little playbook, I'd been creating my own counter-strategy, one built on truth and evidence rather than manipulation. As I watched him eat, smiling occasionally as if nothing was wrong, I realized something profound. I was already alone in this marriage, had been for longer than I'd known. The only difference now was that I understood the rules of the game, and I was finally ready to play. The notebook revelation had left me feeling hollow, yet strangely empowered. I now knew what I was up against: the carefully orchestrated destruction of our marriage, documented in Nathan's own handwriting. So when Nathan casually mentioned over breakfast that he was planning a guys' weekend in Florida the following week, I simply nodded and sipped my coffee. The notebook had already betrayed his true destination: Denver. And he wasn't going alone. "Sounds fun?" I said, my voice steady despite the thundering in my chest. "Which friends are going?" He rattled off names. College buddies I'd met once or twice, never breaking eye contact, never hesitating. The performance was flawless. I almost admired his commitment to the lie. "I hope you have a great time," I said, and I meant it. His trip would give me the opportunity I needed. I called Riley, Nathan's cousin, who'd become my unexpected ally in this nightmare. She worked in digital security and had already helped me back up the evidence I'd gathered. "He's going to Denver next weekend," I told her, my voice barely above a whisper even though I was alone. "And I think I know who's meeting him there." Riley didn't hesitate. "Do you want me to help you track him?" 2 days later, she delivered the confirmation I needed, a burner phone Nathan had been using for months. The call log showed dozens of conversations with someone listed only as J. Janet, of course. "You don't have to do this," Riley warned as we reviewed the data. "You already have enough evidence." But I needed to see it with my own eyes. Needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal. I booked a last-minute flight that would put me in Denver 3 hours after Nathan's arrival. The irony wasn't lost on me, using our joint credit card to fund my spy mission. Let him explain that one to Janet. The Denver airport buzzed with weekend travelers as I grabbed my small carry-on and slipped on oversized sunglasses. I felt like I was in some bizarre spy movie, except this wasn't fiction. This was my life imploding in real time. I took an Uber to the hotel address Riley had tracked from Nathan's burner phone. My heart nearly stopped when I saw them in the lobby. Nathan and Janet checking in together, his hand resting comfortably on her shoulder. No tension, no awkwardness, just the natural intimacy of two people, completely in sync. They were assigned adjacent rooms. Not even the pretense of separation. I registered under my maiden name and requested a room on the same floor. The universe must have been on my side that day, because the clerk assigned me a room just down the hall. The next morning, I followed them at a distance. They took a taxi to an upscale office building downtown. The directory in the lobby listed several businesses, but one stood out. Hargrove and Williams, attorneys at law, specializing in family law and divorce proceedings. I waited in the lobby coffee shop, nursing the most expensive latte I'd ever purchased, watching the elevator numbers like they held the secret to my future. 2 hours later, they emerged, Janet clutching a manila envelope filled with what looked like legal documents. My phone rang that evening as I sat alone in my hotel room, staring at the Denver skyline. An unfamiliar number with a local area code. "Hello?" I answered cautiously. "Is this Mrs. Nathan Andrews?" A male voice asked. I confirmed my identity, my pulse quickening. "This is David Hargrove. I'm an attorney here in Denver." He paused. "I believe I met with your husband today, and I don't normally do this, but something didn't sit right with me." The air left my lungs as he continued. "Your husband and his mother are building a case against you. They're documenting what they're calling emotional instability, creating a narrative that would position him as the victim when he files for divorce." My fingers went numb around the phone as the lawyer continued, explaining how Nathan planned to file first, control the narrative, and potentially secure alimony payments from me, as my income had recently surpassed his. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally managed to ask. "Because I have daughters," he said simply, "and I wouldn't want anyone doing this to them." I flew home the next morning, arriving hours before Nathan would return from his supposed Florida trip. I moved through our house like a ghost, seeing everything differently now. Our wedding photos on the wall, the furniture we'd picked out together, the bed we'd shared, all of it felt like props in an elaborate deception. Riley came over that night. Together, we compiled everything: the burner phone data, hotel footage she'd somehow managed to obtain, the lawyer's contact information, and most damning of all, Nathan's strategic notebook. "I've found someone for you," Riley said, sliding a business card across the kitchen counter. "Caroline Ellsworth. She specializes in high-conflict divorce cases. She's expecting your call." I stared at the card, running my finger over the embossed lettering. This wasn't how our story was supposed to end. This wasn't what marriage was meant to be. "What if I'm overreacting?" I whispered, a final moment of doubt surfacing as I contemplated the finality of what I was about to do. Riley took my hands in hers. "Listen to me. They were planning to destroy you. Methodically, deliberately. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is psychological warfare." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. She was right. The evidence wasn't just suggesting betrayal. It was screaming it. As I heard Nathan's key in the front door, returning from his fictional boys' trip with a tan he'd somehow acquired in Denver, I squeezed Riley's hands one last time. She slipped out the back door as I prepared to give the performance of my life. "How was Florida?" I asked, kissing his cheek as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. And as he launched into elaborate stories about beaches and bars I knew he'd never seen, I made a silent vow to myself. This would be the last time Nathan Andrews ever lied to my face. I spent the next week in a strange kind of limbo, sleeping beside the man who was planning my emotional execution while I orchestrated his downfall. Every kiss felt like a betrayal, every casual conversation a performance. But beneath my calm exterior, I was meticulously planning the perfect ambush. I invited Riley and several of Nathan's family members over for what I called a casual game night. I told Nathan about it at the last minute, knowing he couldn't refuse without appearing suspicious. I also knew his mother would insist on coming along. She never missed an opportunity to observe our marriage up close. As I set out snacks and arranged board games on the coffee table, my hands trembled slightly. Everything had to appear normal until the moment it wasn't. The doorbell rang at exactly 7. Riley arrived first, giving me a subtle nod that conveyed both support and concern. Nathan's cousins and his sister followed, filling our living room with casual chatter and laughter that felt surreal against the backdrop of what was about to unfold. At 7:30, I heard Nathan's key in the lock. He and Janet walked in together, her arm looped through his in that possessive way I'd grown to despise. Their matching expressions of surprise at seeing the gathering seemed rehearsed, as if they'd discussed their reactions beforehand. "Sorry we're late," Nathan said, kissing my cheek with practiced affection. Mom wanted to stop for wine. Janet held up a bottle of my least favorite red, something she knew well after 10 years of passive-aggressive gift-giving. "Hope everyone's ready for some fun," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I waited until they had settled into seats before I picked up the remote control. "Actually, we're not playing games tonight. We're here for a presentation." The confusion on Nathan's face might have been comical under different circumstances. Janet's eyes narrowed instantly, always quicker than her son to sense danger. I clicked the remote, and our television lit up with security footage from the Denver hotel lobby. There they were, Nathan and Janet, checking in together, his hand resting on her shoulder with practiced familiarity. "This is from last weekend," I explained to the suddenly silent room, when Nathan was supposedly in Florida with his college friends. Before either of them could respond, I clicked to the next slide, footage of them entering the law firm, time-stamped and unmistakable. "And this is Hargrove and Williams, a family law firm specializing in divorce cases." I moved methodically through my evidence, screenshots of the Operation Reset notebook, recordings I'd made during our therapy sessions when Nathan had deliberately misrepresented my reactions, and finally, the lawyer's business card with my handwritten notes from our conversation. "David Hargrove has quite a conscience," I said, looking directly at my husband. "He didn't feel right about how you and your mother were building a false narrative about my mental stability." Nathan stood up, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment. I couldn't tell which. "You don't understand," he started. I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." The room was so quiet I could hear the ice shifting in glasses. Janet sat rigidly, her jaw clenched so tight I could see a muscle twitching near her temple. I pressed play on the final piece of evidence, a voice memo Riley had helped me extract from Nathan's burner phone. His voice filled the room, casual and confident. "She'll fold. She's too proud to cause drama. We just need to control the narrative." Janet's voice replied, "You've always been too soft with her. This time, we finish it our way." As the recording ended, I reached behind the couch and pulled out a manila envelope. I walked slowly across the room and placed it in Nathan's hands. "You plan to make me look crazy," I said, my voice finally betraying some of the hurt beneath my anger. "You were building a story that made you the victim. But I don't play quiet, and I don't play dumb." He opened the envelope with trembling fingers, pulling out divorce papers already filled with my information and signature. "You have 24 hours to pack your things," I said. "Anything left behind will be donated or discarded." Janet stood up then, her face twisted with fury. "You ungrateful little—" "Not another word," Riley interrupted, stepping forward. "There are 7 witnesses in this room who've seen everything. Think carefully about what you say next." The silence that followed was deafening. Nathan looked lost, smaller somehow, as the carefully constructed facade of our marriage collapsed around him. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of the man I thought I'd married. Confused, vulnerable, human. But it vanished quickly behind a mask of cold calculation that I now recognized as his true face. "You'll regret this," he said quietly, tucking the divorce papers back into the envelope. "You have no idea what you're doing." I smiled then, surprising even myself with the genuine relief that washed over me. For the first time in years, I know exactly what I'm doing. As Nathan and Janet left, together of course, the remaining family members sat in stunned silence. One by one, they approached me with awkward hugs and whispered apologies for not seeing what had been happening. That night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my living room, holding a glass of Janet's awful wine. The house felt emptier but somehow lighter, as if a toxic presence had been cleansed away. I'd lost a husband but found something more valuable in the process. The unshakable certainty that I deserved better than manipulation disguised as love. The road ahead would be difficult, but for the first time in years, it was mine alone to travel. No more looking over my shoulder, no more second-guessing my own reality. Sometimes the people who should love us most become the architects of our pain. I learned that love shouldn't require evidence collection or constant vigilance. And while the hurt would take time to heal, I already felt the first stirrings of something unexpected taking root in its place. Not just anger or vindication, but genuine hope for a future where I wouldn't have to fight to be believed. The aftermath was exactly what you'd expect. Nate launched into full damage control mode. For weeks, he bombarded me with desperate texts and voicemails, each one more pathetic than the last. I was manipulated too, he'd plead, voice cracking with what sounded like genuine anguish. Mom pressured me. She's always had this hold over me. But his words fell on deaf ears. I was beyond the point where explanations mattered. The betrayal ran too deep, like poison that had seeped into every memory we'd shared. I didn't waste time wallowing. While Nate begged, I acted. I filed a restraining order against Janet, documenting every instance of harassment, manipulation, and attempted financial abuse. The judge's eyes widened as he reviewed the extensive evidence, especially the recordings of her threatening to destroy my reputation if I didn't fall in line with the family's expectations. I've rarely seen such calculated manipulation, he said, signing the order without hesitation. But I wasn't finished. An anonymous tip to Janet's homeowners association triggered an investigation that uncovered something even I hadn't expected. She'd been running a small-scale scam targeting elderly residents, collecting special assessments that somehow never made it to the association's books. The look on her face when officers arrived with questions was apparently priceless, according to Riley, who'd made a point to be walking her dog nearby that morning. Financially, I protected myself with surgical precision. My name had never been added to most of our joint debts, not because I was planning an escape, but because Janet had always insisted that Nathan handle the finances. Her controlling nature had inadvertently given me a clean break. I cleared my credit, secured the house since I'd paid the entire down payment from my inheritance, and transferred my retirement fund to accounts Nate couldn't access. When the dust settled, Nathan left with nothing but a ruined reputation and an even angrier mother who now blamed him for exposing her schemes. Late one night, as I sat on my porch swing, the one Nathan had always complained creaked too loudly. Riley joined me with 2 glasses of wine. "You know what amazes me?" she said, handing me a glass. "How you documented everything so carefully. It's like some part of you always knew this day would come." I took a long sip before answering. I think I did know, not consciously, but something inside me was gathering evidence while my heart was still trying to make it work. "Do you have regrets?" Riley asked quietly. The question hung in the night air between us. "I regret not drawing boundaries sooner," I admitted. "I regret believing that love meant enduring disrespect. But I'm proud that I ended things on my terms, that I gathered what I needed to protect myself from their manipulations." We sat in comfortable silence as crickets chirped around us. The night was warm, and for the first time in years I felt no need to check my phone, to monitor Nathan's messages, to wonder where he was or what he was planning. Sometimes the people who should love us most become the architects of our pain. Through all of this, I've learned that love shouldn't require evidence collection or constant vigilance. True partnership is built on respect, honesty, and putting your spouse before all others, even your mother. Don't ignore red flags hoping they'll disappear. They don't. They just grow into red banners, waving frantically while you pretend not to see them. I may have lost a husband, but I reclaimed my dignity and discovered a strength I never knew I had. I found that my voice, once silenced by doubt and gaslighting, could roar when necessary. And most importantly, I learned that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's the ultimate act of self-love. You deserve a relationship where you're cherished, not manipulated, prioritized, not an afterthought. Now, as I rebuild my life one peaceful day at a time, I sometimes think about the woman I was, desperate to be loved, willing to shrink to fit someone else's expectations. She feels like a stranger now, someone I want to reach back through time and shake awake. But then I remember, she got here eventually. She found her way to freedom. And in the end, that's all that matters. Sometimes the people who should love us most become the architects of our pain. I learned that love shouldn't require evidence collection or constant vigilance. True partnership is built on respect, honesty, and putting your spouse before all others. Don't ignore red flags hoping they'll disappear. They usually grow into red banners. I may have lost a husband, but I reclaimed my dignity and discovered a strength I never knew I had. Remember, you deserve a relationship where you're cherished, not manipulated, prioritized, not an afterthought. And in the end, standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's the ultimate act of self-love.